Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today, the man who is thoughts become things, Neo-Positivity. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And this is back-to-back. This is back-to-back Neo this week, because yesterday Neo did the show with me, and we talked about sleep and dream and REM cycles, and then it just kind of spiraled into all the usual good stuff we talk about. But twice in 1 week, Neo, I mean, we're going to become addicted to you here. This is good.
I'll take it. Every time I hear the intro and it says, the man that is Neo, I'm like, I forget about that every time. But that was actually perfect. How you set that up. So thanks for that. Thanks for, a great year. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. 2023 just around the corner, and we're looking forward to it. We're also looking forward to getting to know our special guest today. Her name is Stacie Shifflett. And Stacie is, well, she has a lot of different labels and descriptors, but one word really stands out. She describes herself as a practicalist. And you might wonder, what is a practicalist? Well, it turns out a practicalist is a person who is devoted to or advocates for what is practical as opposed to what is theoretical. In other words, a pragmatist. And she's going to share some of that practical, pragmatic, practicalist teaching with us today. So, Stacie, welcome to the program. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Glad to have you. And you got to give us like the little bit of, the 1 minute background of how you got to where you are now doing this.
Oh gosh. Well, like many people, I had one of those big events, right? I had a life altering event, a divorce after 28 years of marriage, which, kind of threw me into a spiral, right? It's a big life change. And, it set me, yeah.
I just went through something 3 months ago that I detailed earlier this week for the audience, exactly the same kind of thing. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
I listened to that podcast today, as a matter of fact.
Did you really? Okay.
I did. I tried to do some, some research, but, those big things. I actually had written a note to what came to me when I was listening to your podcast. The big things bring us to our knees, right? They can bring us to our knees. And what I found when I was brought to my knees, and it wasn't the first time in my life, I lost my first child when he was a month old. And I described that experience as going to hell. And I was very fortunate to come out, right? I made it through that. So through my divorce, I would tell myself that, if I could get through the loss of a child, I could get through this. But it set me out on a journey, really to discover a lot about myself, but also to discover about the human condition in general, right? It just whetted that appetite. And, I learned a lot. I studied with Tony Robbins for 2 years as a platinum partner. I've studied with a number of people over the years and had very good fortune in that. My business was sort of running itself. I was truly an owner, not an operator. So I had the free time, thankfully, to be able to do all of those things. And through all this, I got this calling to create this company. So I followed it, and that's what I did. I resisted it for quite a while. And I finally surrendered to the idea. I was guided to write, and I had been ignoring that. And I finally said, okay. You know how it goes sometimes, right? You're like, all right, you're not going to leave me alone. I'll do it. And within a couple of hours, I had a text message from a friend that said, hey, she had a friend that had one spot left in a book with Les Brown. It was a collaboration book. Oh. So I couldn't say no at that point, because I had just told the universe that I would surrender to do whatever. So I bit the bullet, and that's when I really realized that I needed to go ahead and launch the company. I could launch the company with the start of the book. But what I wrote down earlier is it's the big things that bring us to our knees, like I said. And where the practicality comes in for me is, and from what I've learned and from my experiences, which have been vast and varied. I'm 65 years old now, so I've lived a lot of life. It's accumulation of all the little stuff that has the greatest ability to impact our lives. And so that's kind of what I focus on with people. that little stuff. And how do you unravel all that little stuff that guides us in everything that we do?
It's interesting how so often these stories begin with, I call them crash and burn sessions. For you, it was the loss of a child, and then also a loss of a marriage. And they, like you said, they can bring you to your knees. They're also in some ways kind of a test of, how strong is your network, and how much have you learned so far that you can apply, and how much can you learn from what's going on and so forth. But when we're in the middle of it, that none of that applies in our mind. The only thing that applies is, oh my God, how did this happen? How am I going to climb out of this one? It isn't until later we realize, well, there was actually some good there, but I really didn't want to acknowledge any of it.
I know. Well, one of the things that I work with people on, and one of the things that I've really been delving into a lot lately, it's just been so rich in material, is our emotional triggers, right? And, I knew that when I got to the point where I could just chuckle, when I got triggered, particularly from my ex, I was like, wow, this is awesome, right?
Yeah.
I'm there. I made it, right? I got through it. And obviously it took a lot of time to do that. It took a lot of study and a lot of intentional living and being aware of my thoughts and actions and what I was doing and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's all good stuff.
And when you were talking about what happened in your background, I was watching Neo's face, because when you got to the point where you talked about how you lost your child, the look on his face was one of horror. Just, oh my God. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I don't know what was going through your I mean, you have a young one. Maybe that was what was going through your head. I'm not sure what was going through your head, but it was just horror.
I mean, it's something that no parent should go through. My kids are my world, and my sister passed away, so my father and mother have experienced that, and it's just when you say that, I'm like man, like that's some stuff to come out of right there.
It is. They actually say that the loss of a child is the worst, right? And then the loss of a sibling, and then that's all of that is well before the loss of a spouse or a parent, because we assume that we're going to outlive our parents, so it's expected to some degree, even though it can be quite traumatic. It was a very, very difficult experience, and I'm happy to share with you, if you want, how I got through it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it again, I guess it kind of goes back to why I call myself a practicalist, right? A pragmatist.
But hold on, if I can catch you before you get started, I just want
absolutely.
to ask you the same formula for everything. Like everybody's going to use this formula, or is it custom to each?
It's really custom. I have there's a standard set of questions when we start looking at what triggers us and what's behind, everything comes down to love and fear. I'm sure you know that with the work that you do, right? So it's a matter of drilling down, and generally what we think it isn't really what it is. And I'm sure you know that as well, right? It's getting down to the root causes. And my personal background is a project manager doing very difficult, very complex, large scale projects. The analyst in me, right, really facilitates that work.
So yeah. Analyze what's real versus what's not, and use that as like an anchor to keep you from.
Well, it's having good questions, right? It's asking good questions and directing your thought intentionally and trying to understand, there's a lot to be learned about human behavior in general. There's a lot to be learned about beliefs, even emotions, right? We think we know what emotion we're feeling, but we're really not. Emotions necessarily, right? Emotions are very, very complex. And as an example, going through my divorce initially, I was just angry. And I stayed angry for quite a while, but what I really was grieving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and so the expression of the emotion and what we label the emotion can be different than the emotion that we're actually feeling. And it takes some time, and it could take some guidance, you know, with compassion, of course, to help people along on these journeys.
I think it's also fair to say that there is a great deal of overlap among these emotions. I mean, you mentioned grief versus anger, but really, I mean, a lot of grief is going to be on the same plane, so to speak, as anger, because, you know, the loved one was gone now and not coming back. And, well, yeah, of course you're going to be angry about that.
Well, and the frequency of those emotions are very similar, right?
Yeah.
When we look at the actual frequency of it, you know, those dark, heavy emotions are similar in feeling. And then, of course, you know, when we get all excited and we're happy and we're upbeat, you know, that's a much higher frequency emotion, and we exhibit it physically in our bodies.
Yeah.
You know what? I learned a while ago to just put them all into one category called pain. Like sadness is pain, anger is pain, you know, and I try to deal with any type of pain, you know, the same way, you know, with the whole law of attraction and looking forward, finding the silver linings to certain situations, and just seeing yourself past it as far as emotionally. I'm not going to cry for the next 6 years of my life.
Do you also process the emotion, Neo, to get it out? You know, the saying, better out than in?
Yeah, I'm a crier. I'm a Pisces, so I find that a good let out gets let out, you know. I hate to say it, but I've become that guy that if I have too many beverages, you know, it's not at party in front of everybody, but when I get home from a night like that, I use it to my advantage. Like the party's over, everything's cool. There's some stuff that, you know, I might have been holding on to for the last 2 months, be it society, how the world is going, something might have happened in the news, you know, all kind of craziness, or just the weight of the world on my shoulders. I use that as an outlet to literally comes out through my tears. And I always end up laughing at the end, because I realize that it's all temporary. It's all meant to be, you know, and it's all heading in one direction, my direction, you know, the positive direction. And then, so it ends up being a good thing, but I actually literally utilize that, you know, to my advantage.
I think it's important for us to process our emotion and to honor it, right? We have the feeling for a reason. So it's important, and we can schedule time to do that, right? It doesn't mean we have to have a breakdown out in public, although sometimes we do, but, you know, we can make mental notes of those things and set aside some time to contemplate and process it as well. And through our bodies, not only just through our minds, but through our bodies. And there are some techniques like emotional freedom tapping, right? That can help move it out of your body as well.
You know, I would like to key in on that, because I know anybody listening really would want to hear how to work through or process, you know, how, you know, if they're going through something, they don't know how to handle it and it's about to explode out of their chest, and they hear this show and they hear the word process, they're going to want to know exactly what they should do, where they should take their thoughts, when their thoughts go here, what they should do with them, and how to completely, you know, handle this. And then the physical aspect too. I'd love to hear both of those.
Well, I think when you're going through something, I think one thing is to look into your network that you have, right? To see who can be trusted with what you're feeling. And by trusted, I mean that they're not going to judge you. They're going to be compassionate, that they just want the best for you. And I think that that's a very, very important thing. If you have someone like that in your network, right? Not everybody does. I think that getting help is key, right? I think sometimes that we need someone to talk to about things and talk through things with. I read a lot. I started, and there are a lot of free resources as well, right? There's a lot of books you can read. There's a lot of podcasts. There's videos. There's educational programs that are available for very low fees these days on, Udemy or Mindvalley or, or wherever. And I think that, if you don't want to stay where you are, you have to do something differently. You know, the saying that, who was it that said you can't expect something new if you keep doing the same thing over and over, right? And expect a different result. Was it Einstein or?
No, it was me.
It was you? Yeah, there you go. You just can't. So I think when we have the realization that, gosh, there's got to be more. Something's just not right here, and there has to be more. And I actually do have a name for that. And I call that an illuminated skeptic in my modern consciousness theory, right? We have automatons, a phase called automatons where we're just running on automatic. We're doing all of our things, but quite frankly, we're brought up to do that, right? We're put into institutions and schools and churches and so on and so forth. And thank goodness, because we have to learn everything, right? We know nothing when we come in. So, but we tend to run on automatic. And the next phase that I have found is what I call the illuminated skeptic. And it's not that what you become skeptical of is when you start asking the question, is this really all there is? Is this how I'm going to feel the rest of my life? Is this what my life is all about? And it doesn't have to be some big spiritual revelation. It's sometimes kind of quiet, right? And it will keep telling you, something's not right here, something's not right here, until it gets louder and louder and louder. And then we might have those moments that bring us to our knees, right?
I want to, Walt, you recently, you've shared your story with everybody, and outside of techniques that we talked about, anything else you've been using to just get through those moments?
Wow. Every one of them I can never think of at any given moment in time. That's which ones I've been using, all of them. But I can tell you one of the most important things I've been doing is appreciating my social network. Because as Stacie was saying, if you have people you can reach out to, and I feel very fortunate. I had you, Debbie G, I had Joel and Cindy and Anne Marie and all these great people to reach out to. Boy, there's nothing like having a whole bunch of friends who are life coaches and therapists to reach out to when you're in the middle of something like that. Holy cow, it's the best. But by appreciating it, I also mean I appreciate the years that I put into developing those relationships. And I say that because for those who are going through something right now, how much support you have or how little support you have. But for those who aren't going through something right now, this is the time to start building out the social network. This is the time to start creating those relationships, because a time is going to come when you're going to need them. And boy, it's great to have them there when that time comes, because it makes it so much easier to work through whatever it is that you're having to work through. So that's probably the biggest takeaway that I've experienced out of it. In terms of techniques that I use, I use probably every single process in the back of the Abraham Hicks books. I've used just about every single meditation technique you can think of, affirmations, appreciations. It was literally just, what can I think of that particular moment of that particular day? Or, go to my list on the wall, all the things that I've written down that I can do. And again, that also points to preparation. I created that list on the wall so that when the day came when I needed it, I could go reference it. I could, because that's what happens, right? When you're in the middle of something, you can't think of anything. Like, what do I do now? You're just so overwrought,
I got triggers and alarms that go off reminding me to do mental exercises. And I promise you, 80% of these little alerts that go off, I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What? In the eggs? Okay. And it just doesn't get done. So I totally feel you on that. And my simplest one is written on my poker chip. It just says thank you. Just say thank you 10 times. But that's too easy. Sometimes I'm like, all right, I want to specifically gear it towards my next goal. What's that? We can catch up? And it's gone. So it's like setting it up, like you said, writing it out wherever you need to put it, and having it readily available, and then using it. is all a choice.
I'm
And
just
that
remembering
moment,
too. I'm
in
remembering
that
something.
moment,
There was one particular point. It was within the first week or two of when it happened, and it was one of many very low points. But I remember I somehow brought to my mind, oh, there's the Ho'oponopono prayer, which I almost never use.
yeah, you're right. I forgot about that.
But I remembered it, and I said, okay, I'm going to try to use that now. And oh my God, was that poignant?
Yeah.
I mean, I had never experienced that level of meaning associated with it before, but in the context of what I was going through, I mean, talk about the tears coming to my eyes. Yeah.
You know what? It's funny. I don't really know much about that, but it does something. I've done it a bunch of times. It does something. Because I'm like, am I saying this to myself? Am I saying this to God? Am I God saying this to me? Or universe, whatever you want to consider, whatever you call it. So I flipped it 19 different times so that when I do say it, I don't know who's saying it to who until something just feels right. And I'm like, all right, I'm saying I forgive myself, for manifesting this. Because it's like, oh my God, this happened to me. I'm going to blame God. I forgive you, God. You kind of manifested it. So if anybody you're forgiving, it's going to be or manifest. First spending time in that headspace last week and the week before and the week before. Not setting alarms and triggers to wake up and be thankful as opposed to letting yourself stew in the bad emails. So yeah, it's definitely a powerful exercise. Dan Mangena brought that to me. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, Dan's wonderful. Yeah, he's one of our co-hosts here. Stacie, what do you like to go to? What's your go-to when you're needing to reach for something?
I like to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I like to just find a quiet spot and, usually I just will come up to my room and I like to do it in a prone position. I like to lay down and put a face mask on and just focus on my breath and just breathe. And I will set an intention sometimes, I might have an experience during a meditation, but a lot of times I set an intention, or if I'm asking for help or if I need guidance or I need clarity, it doesn't usually come to me during the meditation, but later that day, all of a sudden it'll be like, boom, there it is.
Right.
And, it comes in and I've got goosebumps telling you it'll come in such a powerful way that you don't miss it. But Neo, kind of back to what you were saying, we have to practice it and we have to practice and practice. We have to retrain our subconscious brain, right? We have to sort of get it working for us until we start actually embodying it, that it becomes natural, right? It becomes our default versus what is currently our default. I'll give you a funny example, and we have to praise ourselves for that too. I'll give you kind of a funny example. My mother used to be the worst backseat driver ever. God rest her soul. She was terrible. And, I can remember driving and, she'd backseat drive my dad, me, and I would just get so annoyed. And it was a real trigger for me, right? It'd be like, you want to drive? That kind of thing. So I did a trip with my son this year and we did a lot of driving and we shared the driving, and he actually was just here in Sarasota visiting me, and he would do some of the driving or I would do some of the driving. And when I'm driving, he might say something to me, right? Like the light's turning red or, whatever. And I noticed, because what we notice is what's going on around us, right? You notice what you notice, and you should notice things about yourself too, right? The positive things as well as the negative thing. But I noticed that every time he did it, I was just like, oh, thank you, honey. And he did it frequently, and I just said, thank you. Gosh, thank you. No, I've got it. I don't need you to tell me how to drive, this, that, and the other thing. So that's why I say when we work on triggers, that something that simple can cause so much angst. I used to get so irritated with my mom, right? She was terrible. She was terrible. And, I don't get irritated anymore, right? It's just it sounds like such a simple thing, but to me, I noticed it and I kind of patted myself on the back and noticed the change from years ago. And how different that makes the whole drive.
You're reminding me of something because my ex's father and stepmother did exactly that. And
Oh,
I remember, I remember, oh yeah, it was, and not only that, they weren't good drivers either, but
yeah, it's like, we play this all the time.
but I remember what my technique was, and I don't even remember how I came up with this, but my technique was, you know, I don't know if they still have them, but it used to be years ago, they had these little place steering wheels that you could put in front of a 2-year-old. I imagine those place steering wheels in front of them in each of their seat positions so they can play with their little steering wheel and they can push their little horn button. And that's what I would think of every time that they were doing this. So I wasn't even hearing what they were saying. I was hearing the beep, beep, beep of that little button on the place steering wheel.
And that's great. You know, that's it. We learn our own little tricks, right? But it removes you emotionally from the situation, right?
Exactly.
Other than to get a chuckle,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's great.
And that's usually what happened. My ex would look over at me and wonder why I was smiling. She'd even ask me at times, you know, like, you know, are you okay? Oh yeah, I'm fine.
No, I gotta ask you this. Was there any process involved? Like in my mind, I would dissect that and be thinking, okay, people pride themselves on their driving skills. And in this moment, it feels like someone's attacking my ability to drive. And that is disrespectful to me and something I hold so dear to me. And so that's why it's like irritating that they will, you know, did you take it to that there at all, or you just scrapped off?
No, with my mom, it was just, oh my God, she's so controlling. Just stop it. Right. Just, it was more of a controlling, you know, demeanor of hers. Right. And meaning well with it. Right. But, no, it didn't. You know, it wasn't that. But it was something, right? It would trigger my feeling that she needed to control others always, right? So that was what was there.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
again, there's always something underneath it, right? And I can tell you now that what that was, and I probably even knew then why it irritated me. But I didn't know how to deal with it or just let it go, right? You hear so many people say, oh, it's just the way I am. Well, you know, you can do something about that if it's not making you happy. Oh. And if it's negatively impacting those around you that you love, right? I like peace. I like peace. I think that's the biggest achievement, is just to have peace of heart and peace of mind. And I've thought that, again, to my mother's consternation, since I was little, right? Because she would scold me for something. And I can remember being very, very small and go, well, I have peace of mind. And as long as I have peace of mind, I'm going to heaven and I'm fine, even as a little girl. So
wow. What a thing to come out of your mouth at that age. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. If only I had really realized what was what all these years. But all these years serve us too, right? All of our experiences serve us in a way, and we wouldn't be who we are without all of them. So I'm grateful for all of them.
Yeah, we were just talking about that yesterday, being grateful for the negative experiences in our life, because they got us to where we are. Like all the negative stuff that's happened to me shapes how I make my decisions now. And my decisions obviously are shaping my world around me, for me and everyone who depends on me. So shout out to all the negative. As much as I don't want you in the future, I appreciate life for what it's been. You know, that's how you got to be.
It's a really great point, because the more that we can make peace with that, the less it affects us. You know, we tend to turn these negatives into these monsters, right? We turn them into these great big mountains to be climbed, and we really don't have to at all. That's just us. That's just us choosing to go that route, but we really don't have to. We could actually choose to find a way to appreciate, and all of a sudden becomes this little tiny mouse.
Yeah, we can overcome so much. I mean, we can, you know, the human spirit is amazing, and our ability for resilience, and to bounce back is actually quite amazing if we allow ourselves to do that.
Allowing is a big portion of it. Let's talk about the relationship between triggers and allowing, because, I mean, you have a coaching program. What's the name of the coaching program again?
It's called, I've got a mini coaching program that I've got put together, and it's called Triggered Much. And,
Triggered much, right.
Yeah, it looks into, it's 3 sessions, and we look at 3 triggers, and I'm betting that most of them come down to probably one thing when we look at it. But there's an educational component to it, right? Mm-hmm. Understanding a little bit about our fight and flight and what goes on physiologically, what goes on emotionally. There's some prerequisites, if you will, so that there is some teaching, and then there is coaching in looking at your triggers, and then how to, in your situation, it's all customized. It's one-on-one, how to best get a grip on those and change them, or what are they trying to tell you? I have a saying. I like to say that triggers are a treasure map to happiness.
Ooh.
Because when we can overcome what's pulling us off center and into negative emotion, when we can overcome that, then that balances us, and it allows us to stay in just a better frame of mind, stay in flow, all of those sorts of things. So the reason I developed the program is because if you start understanding what's pulling you out of balance, what's irritating you, what's making you happy, they're not irritations at all. Yes, they irritate us, but we should do something about it so that they don't. We can do something about that, and gain a better understanding of what's actually going on.
Talk a little bit more about the understanding that you help a client to achieve through the mini program, of what the role is of the trigger and how it came about and why it even exists at all. Tie that together for us a little bit more.
Well, when we get trigger, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example from a client, and sometimes they're very small things, but they make very big differences, right? And I'll share it to you as a story and an example. I have a client that she works a lot. She gets home. It's busy at work. Her husband doesn't work. He's retired. So he's really happy when she comes home. He wants to do stuff. He wants to talk. He wants to, all of this stuff. And she's tired. She doesn't want to do any of it. So they would end up having an argument. And the realization that we came to is, he wants the relationship. He wants her. He finds happiness with her. He likes the intimacy with her, the conversation, all of this. She deeply cares about him, wants him happy. Everything's good. And we came up with a very simple solution, which was schedule time with him. Schedule that, hey, I've got a really busy week. It's Monday. I've got a really busy day today. I'm not going to be able to do blah, blah, blah tonight. But tomorrow night, I would like you to go grocery shopping, and we're going to make a nice steak dinner at home. We're going to cook it together, and, so on and so forth. Very simple solution, and it made 100% difference.
When you describe that, what goes through my mind is that you call it scheduling. I call it prioritizing.
That as well. Yes. That's a good word. I like that.
Making that person, in this case, making that person a priority. Because once you make somebody or a situation or whatever it is a priority, well, you already know how to handle that. You have priorities all the time. This is not a new experience, right?
Well, it goes back to setting expectations too, right? So, that set the expectation up with him that, gosh, when she gets home this evening, she's, maybe I should have dinner ready for her, right? She's got a busy day. She's really not going to be available for me. She's going to be tired. But we have this special time tomorrow.
Where attention goes, energy flows.
Yes, absolutely.
Whether it be a spouse or a garden. your job, your child's education, your fingernails. Doesn't matter where you're giving that attention to, and energy, which is the same thing, is going to grow. So I love that so much. When I do like counseling or coaching, whatever you want to call it, people have marital problems. He's like, she doesn't cook for me anymore. Walt, you've heard me say this before. I tell them to picture the last time she did and how good it felt. And if she never has, it doesn't have to be her. Just picture someone cooking for you and them appreciating you enough to cook for you and you appreciating them for cooking for you. And it was delicious and it was just all around a wholesome meal for your soul and your heart. Picture that. And I guarantee she'll at least make you a sandwich tomorrow.
That's right. That's right.
Now you got something to hold on to and say, wow, this stuff works. Or, man, she really did it. I wonder what we can do next. Or let me make her a sandwich now. And let's bounce off of each other. So definitely that is 100% life where your attention goes.
Well, this is a simple thing, and it's just, it is, as you said, energy, but we get into these habits, right? And our triggers are habits too, right? Yep. We get irritated or offended at the same things, and half the time we really don't know what it is. We ascribe it to something that it isn't. We might direct it outward to someone else. Oftentimes it's directed inward, right? To our own unworthiness, our own, perceived lack of ability, or how we compare ourselves to others, or how we compare ourselves to the ideal. And, it's breaking those habits. And it's not until you really start to stop and look at them. And it's one of the things I like to have people do is sort of journal through the day. What's irritating you through the day, right? What is getting on your nerves? How do you identify what those triggers are? And it's a gold mine to work with people. And I don't mean gold mine financially. I mean gold mine for the person, right? To transform through, it's like alchemy, right? You find that, that dirty nugget of gold, and it's filthy and you can't see the beauty within it because it's all cloudy from the outside, right? And that's all our stuff, right? That's just all our stuff. And through the process of refining it, we find the beauty within, and it begins to shine and it begins to gleam.
I want to say two things. One, it's a gold mine as far as your contribution to this planet. What you're doing time here. So I definitely love that. But I wanted to ask you this because a majority of relationships that I've dealt with as far as coaching have all had this underlying foundation of cheating. Either he got caught cheating or she thinks he was cheating 2 years ago. But when she's yelling at him for the dishes or the trash or the lawn, kind of break stuff down and it all kind of goes back to that one moment, whether it happened or not. In that situation, how do you coach somebody out of that? Cause I got a couple people I'll probably call when I'm done this. Like, listen, I got something else for you to try. So yeah, what would you say to someone in that situation that maybe they're even aware enough to catch themselves getting mad at this person for every little thing? Cause it all comes back to them not being able to fully filter out that whole cheating episode out of their heart, mind, and soul, or however you want to word it.
Well, I think they have to raise their awareness about it. It all comes down to awareness, and just asking yourself why for like 7 minutes is great, right? It's a good exercise with the client. They said, well, I was mad at him for not doing the dishes. Well, why? Because blah, blah, blah. Well, why?
And blah, yeah, blah, that's what we do when we get down to the, this did it 7 years ago. It's like, oh my God.
And then the thing is, once they exhibit that emotion, right? Either like you said, oh my God, 7 years ago, well, or they start, that's when you're down to the nugget that we want to work with, right? And that they want to work
justified with. Because they're like, well, it did happen. I have the right to be upset. And then I have no choice but to go to the victim route. Like, all right, well, how long are you going to be a victim to this? Letting it live rent free in your mind. Like Debbie G says, being butthurt. So yeah, at that point, what can you give me to share with these couples?
For one thing, they both have to want to fix it.
Yes.
They both have to be committed at the same level to actually do something about it. And I think oftentimes that's the biggest problem is one person does and the other person doesn't. So I think that's critical.
Yeah, because when I'm thinking about the guys, they're like, man, that was years ago. I've been cool ever since. I only missed washing the dishes once because I was watching the game. So they're like really ready and willing to get past this, obviously. But then the one female or male that was the real victim of it, that actually got cheated on or whatever, I guess is not wanting to, not able to in their mind fully let that go. And that is the second part, because they do both have to be ready to do that. And we all know one side is.
Yeah. Well, and I think you said it was a she may get over it. She may not be willing to get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to respect people's decisions, right? Even though we may be able to see a different side of it, she may never get over it. And then again, both aren't equally committed, right? Equally committed to the same goal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know. Is it a power play for her, perhaps? Is it a way for her to keep control? It's really a matter of trying to understand what's motivating her behavior.
Yeah, this is tying to what we talked about yesterday. What's the payoff? Because there's a payoff for her to stay in that space.
And that's always a great question to ask. You know, how is this benefiting you?
Mm-hmm.
And people will go, well, it doesn't benefit me. It irritates me. Well, it's perpetual. So how is it? and it's perpetual from, emanating from you, right?
If there was no payoff, you wouldn't keep doing it. You would just stop because there'd be no point in it anymore.
Yeah. And we get addicted to emotions as well. So it habits, she may just be used to feeling that way. So how do you break that? How do you break that habit? How do you break that cycle?
And that is a payoff. It's
funny because I'm analyzing the situation. Of course, I'm not going to say any names, although I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a special case. And it's the only one I have where the female actually she's the breadwinner. I'll just say that. And when I asked her about, that whole emotion, like what is your whole, like Walt said yesterday, what are you getting out of it? And the answers are always the same. He ain't going to do it again if I keep reminding him. And I'm like, well, you're arguing about the dishes. He didn't even know you're talking about cheating 7 years ago.
Oh yeah, no, he doesn't know that.
And do you seriously think that nagging him about every little thing, making him pay for something 7 years ago, is going to make him not cheat on you again? I think it's going to end the relationship eventually, or at least lead him to resent you for the rest of his life. Like all this is going to negative space, and then you got kids involved, and 2 of the kids aren't even with him, and 1 is, so they're seeing it, hating him more, and it's just like become this whole thing. And she's like I said, breadwinner, power trip, doesn't want to let it go, wants to keep reinforcing and reminding him that she's on his back. I don't get it, but I haven't been able to get her to stop.
Well, you have to have trust, right? Trust is a key component in a relationship. You have to have trust. If she's never going to trust him again, then
where's the relationship?
Where's the relationship? There's really no place for it to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. They say never again. Once a cheater, always a cheater. And I'm just like, damn. Like, what are you not leaving me with much? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hate generalizations though. I've known people that have been in that situation and they got through it.
Yeah. With
a lot of effort. Again, both were very committed and dedicated and had a direction that they wanted to go to together. And then I know others that it just didn't. They couldn't overcome it.
This is actually where I think it's a really useful thing to apply the payoff idea, because now that you've identified with her what her payoff is, then you keep pushing the payoff button. And in this case, maybe it's something like, okay, so you've decided he's never going to improve. You like that emotion? You like how that feels? Tell me how much you like that. Defend it to me. Defend to me how much that, because recognize, Mr. and Mrs., as long as you stay on that, that's the rest of your life that you're laying out in front of me right now. So you really like this one? You're going to be with this one for years at the rate you're going. Just want to make sure you really do know where you're going with this.
Well, and probably not. I would say probably not for years, because sooner or later someone's going to get tired of it, right? I mean, that's
Well,
when
I actually
what
think it
you're
does go for
building
years.
is the negative emotion. When you're building, the resentment and the irritation, and when that's what you're growing, she's essentially nurturing that in the relationship.
Oh, no doubt.
Not to say that she doesn't have, I don't know the particulars, but that's what you're growing and nurturing and feeding versus switching over to try to feed something positive. And now, granted, it could take small steps and a lot of time to overcome a violation of trust like that. But, it can be done. I've seen people do it.
And I think you're right. It does tend to end the relationship. It does not tend necessarily, though, to end the attitude of, I like that.
Because that does not end.
I mean, because, we carry ourselves to the next relationship. So we create it again in another relationship. We find it's always interesting to me, the people who get cheated on, how often it happens. They keep setting themselves up to be in a relationship in such a way that they're going to get cheated on again. So they can say, yep, see, it always happens to me. And it just happens to the next one, and then the next relationship. And then it's endless until they decide that they're done with it.
I don't like the term at all, but I think it has validity, and it's damaged goods. Like I've had to use that term to get people to realize what they were doing to themselves as far as self-sabotage because of what's happening to them in the past. You can't tell, most of Tyler Perry's movies are based off of that, So yes, you do got to be aware of what you are carrying in your backpack. Can't just.
And it's still, I would still venture to say it's serving them in some way, right? It's serving them, like Walt said, see, I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
It could offer to protect them from any true intimacy, right? They won't open themselves up to be vulnerable, though they don't have the true love of a relationship, the true beauty of an open, vulnerable relationship. It's not all roses and, sunshine. There's a lot of work to do. So this is coming back into my head again, and I want to share it. I started to say it earlier, and it's not something I usually go into, but we brought about the death of the child, and I don't know if it's relevant. I don't know if there's someone that may be listening to this that needs to hear it, but I was absolutely devastated, of course, right? I couldn't open the door, couldn't go to work, oh my God, if anybody delivered flowers to the house, I mean, I was not well. It was a very, very difficult situation. And one of, the doctors recommended, that from the hospital, right? They recommended I go to grief counseling, I would do that. But I finally did I went to one group session. And I think this might be relevant when we say what we keep creating, right? If you want to get over it. So I went to one group session, and there was a number of people, obviously, and we were sitting in a circle, as you do when you're in a group session, and going around, and people were talking about their experience. Now, I lost an infant. He was born with heart defects and died in open heart surgery in the hospital, although they had said he would not die. He would live, he would be fine. I would be cheering him on from the sidelines of a football game. So it's back to expectation. They didn't give me any expectation that it would be anything different. But one of the men in the group, and it was children that were lost for various reasons. Some were in grade school and may have had cancer or some other life-threatening disease, terminal illness. I think there was a kidnapping and a murder. I mean, it was different, all different circumstances. But one of the men in the group was talking about the loss of their child. And I don't, it's been years and years ago, so I don't really remember the age, but I want to say probably about 8 or 9 year old. And, his wife, one of the things he talked about, it had been 5 years. I remember very distinctly it had been 5 years, and she was still unable to go to the grocery store. It was 5 years, and she still couldn't leave the house.
Wow.
And I've got goosebumps as I'm telling you this, so the energy is like surging through my body. And it's the only meeting I went to, and I left that meeting, and this was, I had a few months into my situation and my grief and processing it. And I remember leaving that meeting and I thought, I don't want to be that person. And I'm not judging that person. So let's be very clear about that. I don't mean to put judgment on that person. They were doing the very best that they could do.
You just didn't want to maintain that mindset.
I didn't want to do that. I thought, I don't want to sacrifice the rest of the years of my life to be mourning the loss of this child. And the other thing for me that brought me comfort in some odd way, but it did bring me comfort. My child actually never made it home from the hospital. So he was in NICU. It was early. It was a whole ordeal, but, and of course I had the room set up. I had to take all that down and, all of that stuff. But I told myself I didn't want to be the one that was 5 years and still unable to leave the house. And sometimes we need to look at what's wrong. We need to find the blessing in what's wrong.
Yeah.
And the blessing for me was that my child had never come home. So I didn't have a house full of memories. I didn't have years of memories. And now there's a little arguing back and forth in my head, right? I was robbed, but, I was robbed of those, but I found the blessing in it for me.
Right.
And so I don't know, Neo, how that weighs in or Walt on our conversation, but it's come back into me like 3 times now to say this. So
I think it connects beautifully.
The key thing right there is choice.
Yeah.
Choosing to proactively find the blessing versus letting whatever happened in your mind happen. And I think that's where a lot of people are struggling or may get it wrong. Just letting it flow sometimes is sometimes you gotta look and then you gotta find it and do the work. I always equate the law of attraction and all these mental practices with jogging. You get good at it. It becomes second nature. But if you take a month off, you're no longer good at it. It's not like a black belt where you still got it. No, you got to work back up. So this is a lifelong daily practice thing, the whole mindset shifting. So as long as you're willing to put in the work, that's great, but willing ain't good enough. You got to choose to do it. Every hour, however often you do it, it has to be a choice and you have to make it and stay on your grind or else you might as well just drop out.
No, I agree with you. We have to practice it regularly and be aware of it and be aware when we slip out as well, right? Because we do that a lot at first. And you go, you just kind of, catch yourself and ask yourself, is that really what I want to be? Am I being the person that I want to be? And guess who's in charge of that? We are. We take ourselves everywhere we go. What's the one constant in our life is us. We take ourselves everywhere we go. Don't you want to take somebody fun with you? Don't you want to have, your companion be someone that's happy and upbeat and intelligent and thoughtful and compassionate and deep? And it affects yourself. It affects all of your relationships. And that's the only thing we can control is ourselves. And it does take a lot of practice.
By the way, we got an answer on your question of you didn't know if somebody needed to hear this. Lacey in the live stream said, "I really need this right now. Thank you." So your answer.
I wanted to sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon on what you were saying. For those who are going through this pursuit of enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, spirituality and all this other stuff, once you get good at it, and you're having several days of non-drama, a strange phenomenon is going to happen.
The universe is always testing.
The smallest little dumb email is going to happen, and it is going to affect you like you got kicked in the chest by the Hulk, and you're not going to know why. It just keeps beating you in the face. It's not even that big of a deal. It's because, like I said, the whole jogging thing, you're not used to bad news as much anymore. So when it comes, it hurts a lot harder. So just recognize that and for me, it allowed me to laugh at it more. Like, oh, that's why I keep bringing this up in my head, because I'm just not used to it. It's just a small drama. Let it ride. That's a huge thing, because if you don't know that, you're gonna go insane trying to figure out, everything's been going so great for the past 3 weeks, and this one stupid email I can't get out of my mind. It's just the process. It's not you. It's not the universe telling you that the email's way more important than you think it is intuitively. It's just you're not used to it. And that's why the Spartans they have a whipping post, or a whipping pole, actually. Every week they would get whipped just to be used to it. I don't suggest you get whipped, but they have this thing where they call it taking cold showers once a week or so. Some people do it more than that. You just take a cold shower just to be used to uncomfortable. Just to be used to uncomfortable. That way, if something does happen, you're like, all right, it's not completely foreign to me. And you don't take it like a little punk and want to curl up in the ball in the corner. So yeah, I just wanted to key in on that, because that was a huge discovery for me, and it changed a lot in my mindset as far as maintaining positivity and then something bad happening.
Well, and I've got, I do a little blog too on my website, but I've got one here that is called Getting Acquainted with Your Triggers, right? And it does have a nice little worksheet, right? So even about your email, what's happening in this situation? What are the strongest emotions you're feeling? What are the prominent thoughts that you're having? Who do you criticize? Who do you feel is criticizing you? So it's kind of a stream of questions that you can ask yourself. And you can all, to dive into it a little bit deeper and figure out what is it really, right? And then another thing that I like to do, which is an NLP technique, is perspective shifting. Okay, I feel this way, so I would put myself in the position of the person that wrote the email and say, all right, let me look at this from their perspective. Then I would look and say, okay, there's a third party observer that has no horse in this race. They're just watching this interaction between the two of us. And I would look at it from their perception and perspective, right? What would, if somebody were watching this situation with an objective mindset, what would they be seeing? Mm-hmm. And that's just a little trick called perspective shifting. It's a neurolinguistic programming technique. And it works really, really well.
Okay. Do you have the link for the blog? You can shoot us. We'll make sure.
Yeah, it's on my. I can do that. I don't know how to do that, but
send it in a private chat, and I'll make sure it gets out. Because that sounds like something that would be great to make, like a TikTok or something about, like, hey, ask yourself these 5 questions if you ever get in a bad headspace.
Yeah. All right. Comments, private chat. There we go. Look at that.
Yeah.
That's the one that's on triggers, and it's quite a lengthy set of questions.
That's good. You also have a PDF file called 2 Keys to Happiness. What's that about? Well, it sounds like it's about the keys to happiness, but
well, it's 2 keys to happiness and free your mind. And basically, when I started this journey, I mean, I can remember someone had been referred to me, and I walked into her office, and she was she was a coach, and she did some energetic healing and a number of things. And when I walked in, she said, well, why are you here? And I'm like, because I'm tired of being angry. I'm angry. I'm just tired of it, right? I can't even live with myself anymore, right? I'm just angry inside. But one of the first books that she recommended I read was The 4 Agreements. And 2 of those I put into practice. And it's such an interesting way to gain insight into yourself. So again, in that PDF that I have, there's some teaching about some basic things that we maybe don't know. I didn't necessarily know, and certainly not at the depth that I know them now. But if you look at what you get offended by and how that makes you feel, and also the assumptions you're making, and those are 2 of the 4 agreements. And if you can get a handle on those 2 things, you'll be amazed at the change it makes in your life. Just assumptions alone, we always assume it's about us. It's never about us.
How did we ever come to that conclusion? Gee, I don't know.
It's never about us, right? But we just don't stop and take the time to think about it, right? So we make assumptions, or, the lady at the grocery store is grouchy with us, and, we get offended and we think, oh, why is she in customer service? What business has she got being in this job? You don't know. She may have just had a death in the family, right? She may have to work overtime now and she can't go to her kid's soccer game, and you have no idea. It has nothing to do with you. And don't even try to guess what it's about, because you're going to be wrong. And it doesn't matter, right? We don't need to use our brain power to try to figure that out. It's, bless them, have a good day, smile, go on your way.
Send a little positive energy that way, and
that's
who knows
right.
what they'll do.
Thoughts become things.
It's written right on the shirt, like we said earlier, where attention goes, energy flows. And if your attention is, this customer service rep treat me like crap today, I don't deserve it, guess what? You have just manifested a future where this customer service rep treat me like crap and I don't deserve this. So be careful where you guys go. Be careful where your mind takes you. The book Untethered Soul is amazing at handling those extra voices and suggestions and scenarios that get thrown at you. But it all starts with you, like I said, making the choice to do this research and better yourself. So stay on your grind. Stay on top of your game.
Absolutely. And I mean, our thoughts set off a whole physiological process as well, too. It even thinking about something sets that whole process off, and it's not, the stress response, and it's not healthy. And a lot of us don't ever realize that we're even doing it or what the consequences are of it. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I can remember when my dad would come home and he'd be re-explaining something, and we didn't know what it was called. My mother would just say he would be re-explaining something that happened at work, and his face would get all red and his fists are clenched, and he's, Mom would say, Joe, quit reliving it. Don't relive it. But I didn't understand the science behind that. She didn't understand the science behind it. She just saw physically what was happening to him. And he had high blood pressure, right? So she, God, Joe, settle down, right? Your blood pressure is going up. Excuse me. But, I know now. So sometimes the ability to be able to detach emotionally from something, to try to watch it objectively, observe it objectively, but keep ourselves emotionally out of the situation, provide that little bit of buffer. And that's not to say by any means that we go through life emotionless, or we're not feeling, or we don't show excitement or joy or sadness or any of that. But when we can give ourselves that little bit of buffer and that barrier and make the choice, right? We pause and we get to make the choice of if we want to go there or not. I think that's very, very important.
Side note, tell the joke. I mean, tell it as if it's a joke. They said she'd be a cop, and we tell stories, endless stories. And I think I just realized that every single cop story I've heard was somehow funny. They made it funny. And maybe it was their body was doing it, so they didn't take that time, everything home with them. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what it is now that I think about it. So yeah, if you're going to tell a joke about work that pissed you off, I mean, a story about work that pissed you off, make it a joking format. Give it a shot. Yeah.
It laughs are good, right? Laughs give us all kinds of good chemicals in our bodies.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Laughter is indeed the best medicine. It's one of my favorite things to do.
It really is. Hey, before we part company, Stacie, we need a piece of information from you. If somebody, for instance, wants to try the Triggered Much mini coaching program, or they want to find out more about your other stuff, how do they find you?
They would find me on my website, which is modernconsciousness.com. It's spelled the way it's spelled. You may need to look it up. Maybe not. But it is modernconsciousness.com. They could email me as well. And the email is empower, EMPOWER, like empowerment, right? Empower at aware, AWARE.life, the whole word, LIFE.
Nice.
All right, very good. So we'll make sure we get that into the show notes. And Neil, you plugged it into the chat, but you got a summit coming up in January. Just give us a little bit of, 30 seconds on that one.
Neo-Positivity Thoughts Become Things Summit, January 21st from noon to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. just picture something like this with a little couple more people, round campfire atmosphere. Everybody's just talking about law of attraction, exchanging their tips and mental exercises that they do. You guys can register at neilsloasummit.com, and I will see you guys there. Walt will be there. I'm trying to make sure Debbie's coming. And Stacie, I'd love to have you come up and grab the mic and just, share some of your law of attraction tips. That would be amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Give me the details on it. You've got my email. You've got my personal email. So, yeah, you know how to get a hold of me. That would be lovely. Thank you. It's been quite enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you, Walton. As always, thank you for first responders and the military for doing what they do for us.
And I also want to finish on one note that I make it a practice to finish on, because Stacie, like so many givers, you have many people who have heard you on this podcast or other podcasts, or they've read your blog, or you've touched them in ways that you'll never know about because you never meet them, you never see them, you don't know who they are, but you help them in ways that you didn't know about. And I think it's important to recognize that. So on their behalf, thank you for what you have done and what you're continuing to do, because you're contributing to the light of this world.
Thank you so very much.
And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.